Good morning. My name is Farhad. Today we have Natia Navrouzov, who works for Yazda Global Organization as an executive director. Natia, you are welcome.
Thank you so much, Farhad. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you so much, Natia. Natia, we just want you just talk about yourself. Who is Natia?
Oh, who is Natia? That's a big question. I would start by saying that I was born in Georgia. I'm a Yazidi. I think like many Yazidis, my ancestors came from Turkey. And throughout the genocides, we were moving around trying to survive. And, from my dad's side, my family went to Georgia. And then from my mom's side to Armenia. And then I was born in Georgia. I lived there until I was 10 years old, but because the situation there was very, very difficult, my family decided to go to France. So we went there as refugees, and I grew up there and lived there most of my life.
So good. So people were just saying that, oh, Natia is Yazidi, but she's not from Iraq. How is that possible?
Yeah, I think, what 2014, the genocide of 2014 in a way did is to bring us together, Yazidis from different countries, areas, villages even. And before coming to Iraq, I had never met a Yazidi from Iraq. And, I was mainly interacting with Yazidis either from Georgia or Armenia and Russia. So what about you? Had you ever met a Yazidi from Georgia?
I have never met any Yazidi from Georgia. So
new.
How did you have that information about Yazidis in Iraq? You also had information about them, but from the genocide, how did the genocide affect you, and how all the things were happening?
Yeah. So, growing up, I always knew I was Yazidi because my parents were telling us, although we moved to France and we were living in a city where there were no other Yazidis, we were the only Yazidis. So it was very, very difficult, to keep the identity, to keep the language. But my parents really, really tried hard with me and my siblings. So I knew I was Yazidi. I was celebrating the Eids, I was keeping my identity. But then, when internet came, I started to research about Yazidis. And then I realized, okay, actually the biggest community of Yazidis is in Iraq. And then, I was young and I was thinking, oh, one day I will go there and I will visit, especially Lalish, I need to visit Lalish. But when 2014, took place, of course, it accelerated all of that. And the desire to go there and to help became stronger than ever.
I can see. It's very complicated in these places such as Georgia, Armenia. Armenia is fine, but Georgia and other places, they were like, I had some friends of mine, they were saying that we were Yazidis, but until we grew up, we didn't know that we were Yazidis. So were there some other Yazidis like your family were there in Georgia or some other places?
Yes, so the Yazidis in Georgia, we were mainly living in Tbilisi, the capital. But before it became Georgia as it is today, it was the Soviet Union. And during the Soviet Union, everything was about communism. So you were not supposed to have a religion or talk about your religion. So my family learned how to hide their Yazidi identity. But of course, home, they would tell us, you are Yazidis, you should keep your identity. But especially when we moved to France, it became very, very difficult. And Yazidis in Georgia were discriminated also quite a lot after the Soviet Union collapsed. So the situation there was very difficult.
I can see. So it's very difficult. Yazidis, wherever they are, then they are just persecuted by whomever, by the majority of them. So it's very sad for them. So Natia, what did you study? I just want to know about it.
So many questions.
Yes.
When we moved to France, to be honest, it was very, very difficult. I didn't speak the language. My parents did not know the system. They did not even know how to help us. And I'm the eldest daughter, so very quickly I had to learn the language just to help my family, and the administrative things. And I know a lot of people who, go through immigration and arrive as refugees go through that same experience. While we were still refugees, we were always... we were working with the lawyer who was helping us in our asylum application. And to me, when I was seeing him helping us like that, he was very, very nice. I thought, okay, one day I will be a lawyer. And actually, also in parallel, my father, he did not have the opportunity to study in Tbilisi because it was very difficult for minorities to access education. He wanted to be a lawyer too. So, okay, when I finished my education, I decided to be a lawyer. And I think because I knew my family had made the sacrifice to move from Georgia to France for us, I mean, for their children, they really wanted us to access education.
Sure.
I was working very hard. To be honest, I studied a lot and I really enjoyed studying. And I think education is something that should be very important to our community because it's like a weapon, it's like a invisible weapon that we can use to counter misinformation. We can prevent, in a way, genocides with, what the education that we get, or we can work on fixing what happened in a way. So yeah, I studied law and became a lawyer.
That's so good. I mean, it's very perfect for everyone, specifically for the Yazidi community. I mean, so that they can deliver the message as the minority in Iraq, which they have been like persecuted by many like atrocities of ISIS. Even prior of that, like they had so many genocides by the Ottoman Empire and like following. So it's very important like that for all the Yazidi community just to like give that importance to their children, to their new generation, just to follow their education. I think it's very important. So you did well that you get your dream.
Thank you.
So how did you get involved of helping Yazidis specifically in Iraq, and specifically for the genocide at the time of the ISIS atrocities against Yazidis? Of course, everybody in the world, they just heard about these events. So how did you like involved in that?
Yeah. I mean, just also quickly going back to what you said, I think, unfortunately, all of our personal and family histories as Yazidis are full of firmans, genocide, stories of killing, enslaving. And it was the same in my family, my grandparents, aunts, uncles, even my parents would, tell us about these stories. And we would always think, okay, it's things from another time. This will never happen in this, century. But I think still the families transmit to us this intergenerational trauma, this fear. I think every Yazidi, even Yazidis who are not from Iraq and did not experience the genocide, we have this somehow this feeling of something could happen anytime. And I think this is because of the transmission of the past genocides. So when 2014 happened, I was still studying. I was about to enter my last year of university. I was studying to go to bar school to become, a lawyer. And, people around me, my friends, people that I knew, they somehow knew I was Yazidi, but I was never really talking to them about this because I just thought, okay, there's no interest. Then we started to watch the news on August 3rd and hear Yazidis, and when it started to broadcast on the news, I will never forget. Like I was home, and I just heard my mom screaming. Like I was studying in my room, and she started to scream, and I thought, okay, what happened? What happened to her? I went there. I was very worried, and she couldn't even talk. She was just showing me the TV, and she started to cry. And then even my dad was not home, and then he came home, and he was checking on us and asking us, are you fine? And we were just sitting in the living room on the couch, just watching TV, like powerless, no power, no sense of what we should do, what we can even do, from this distance. So the easiest thing to do at that time was just to protest, to go in the street, protest, try to raise awareness, push our governments to do something. So I got engaged in that. I started to join protests. I started to help some, organizations in France that started to be established. But I always knew that if you really want to help, you need to go to Iraq. This is where the survivors are. This is where the community that suffered is. But I was just looking for a way, and it took me a few years also to finish my education and go to Iraq.
I mean, in those days were very sad for everyone. I mean, in all the European countries, throughout the world, they were just protesting. Actually, we didn't see that much of protest in France. Maybe they did it, as you are just mentioning that. But I think the European countries, or the, I can say, like the Yazidi communities in these countries, they had like a great role of like delivering the message of the Yazidis and how the people were affected by the ISIS. So like, thanks for your effort that you were helping those organizations to do something for the Yazidis.
Of course.
So Natia, I just also want to ask about your work with Yazda.
Yeah. Yeah, and just also reply, I mean, I think this is the minimum we could do. And I think the diaspora, even right now, needs to be more active, needs to be more mobilized, especially people who have been living in Europe or in Western countries for multiple decades. They had access to education, they had opportunities that Yazidis from Iraq did not always have. So I think it's our duty as a community to uplift each other. But yeah, you know, going back to your question, like my goal, as I said, was to go to Iraq. I just didn't know how, because I did not have any relatives or friends, or, you know, I had never been to Iraq. So I started to follow the work of Yazda, you know, and of course other NGOs too, but I was mainly following Yazda because Yazda was very visible, very active in Europe, in the US, I mean, the international sphere in general. And I just Googled, you know, and I was like, okay, unfortunately, they don't have an office in France. So I for a few years, I did not reach out. As I said, I was also studying, then working in Paris. Then I moved to London. And then I was like, okay, Yazda is actually registered in the UK. So this is my opportunity. I just sent him an email. I told him, look, I'm Yazidi, I'm a lawyer. Anything you need, I'm here. I live in London. I'm ready, you know, just give me tasks, or, you know, I can volunteer for you. Murad Ismail responded, I think 5 minutes later. Very, very active. So, you know, basically he connected me with the team in the UK. I met them and I started to volunteer for a few months. I was in London, just, you know, going to meetings, trying to raise awareness. But I kept pushing them. I was telling them, I need to go to Iraq. You know, this is not enough. I need to go. And basically in the summer of that year, 2018, everything was prepared, ready, and I moved to Iraq. And something that you know, I don't tell people a lot is that I didn't even tell my family.
Oh my God.
I was
so strange.
I know. I mean, you know, looking back, it was very reckless, but I thought, okay, I will first go, see how it is, if I can handle it, and then tell them. I mean, of course, I told my sister and some of my friends, but not my mom, specifically my mom, you know, because, you know, when you say Iraq, people imagine all these horrible things like, you know, fighting, and the media is not really picturing always things accurately. So I said, I don't want to worry them. And I went there, I started to work, and almost 6 years later, I'm still here. So of course, at some point I told my mom.
That's so good. But Natia, didn't you see that it's somehow difficult for you just to leave your family, the parents, I mean, your sister, your mom, like the one who used to live with them, to leave everything and just to come to Iraq to work for Yazidis? Like, how did you feel at that time?
I think it's one of the hardest things when you're far from your family. Sometimes I don't see them for months. And they do, you know, always ask me, when are you coming home? When are you coming back to live in Europe, you know? But I think when you commit to a work like that and you decide to serve your community, you need to make some sacrifices.
Sure.
So right now, you know, I'm still young and I'm still, like, you know, in a way, seeing that we have so many issues that need to be addressed. So I can make that sacrifice. And honestly, Farhad, I have never met people as nice as Iraqi people. You know, I love being here. I created my own family here in a way, you know, colleagues from Yazda, but also other people that I met. So it has been also a very rich journey for me personally. Like, I learned a lot about Yazidis, and I went to Shingal, I went to Lalish, I went to many different places. And this made me what I am today. And, you know, I think it's really worth the sacrifice.
So, like, you were just saying that about living with the colleagues, with the living the staff of the Yazda and everyone. I would just ask you how they treat with you. Like, how is your lifestyle with them? Like, did you see that somehow strange for someone comes from France and comes to Iraq with a new lifestyle, with new people?
Yeah.
Everything is changed.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think any Yazidi also right now who is migrating to Australia, Europe, US, and these, you know, Western countries will at some point feel the same. As Yazidis, because we moved around so much, we always have this double culture. We have our Yazidism, you know, this deep feeling of being Yazidis. But then, of course, I'm also French.
Sure.
You know, I grew up in France and I speak French, and my most of my life was there. But people here are usually very welcoming, and they tell me, okay, why are you here? Like, they tell me, we want to leave and you're coming here. How come, you know?
Yes.
But then I explain, you know, and people are very, very, very nice. But it's not always easy. Like, I'm still, you know, learning. There are some things, of course, that are like, I was raised as Yazidi. It's the same as people from Shingal or, you know, Sheikhan, Bashiqa Bazani, but some things are different. So I need to be careful, and it's not always easy. But with people around me helping me, it has been going well.
So what did you learn from them?
Yeah.
What, like some words?
Yeah.
Some food that you don't like, then you liked it. So
Yeah.
of course, many
Iraqi
things changed.
food. Yeah. I mean, you know, growing up, I unfortunately forgot most of my Kurmanji, Yazidki language.
By the way, you speak Kurmanji? Is it?
قالك
Can you say
تفهم
something?
بس طيبة منا قالك يا باشا تشوني
Hello, Bashi. No, it's perfect.
قالك
You should practice, and then you would just
لازم as طيبة خا chicken بس you know what's the problem? Most of my colleagues, and including you, you speak English. So it's easier for me, but to be honest, I understand a lot. But yeah, I think I just need to practice the speaking. But going back to your question, yeah, I think from my colleagues, I learned a lot about generosity. You know, I mean, it's a bit basic to say that, but you know, the Western culture in some ways is very different. It's very individualistic. Here, it's all about the community, and in a way, I really, really like that. You know, like you think about your family, you think about your community, you do things together. Also, the concept of time.
Sure.
You know, before I was very stressed about time. Like if I was late somewhere, it's like, that's not good. Here, people are like, relax, you know, like you have time.
That's fine.
So it's really nice to be in this environment. But of course, there are also many, many challenges. And sometimes I do feel that life is unfair because I always have my French passport. If I need to leave the country, I can.
Sure.
But many people here are struggling. Sometimes they're like threatened. They are like in life danger. You know, they need medical care and they cannot go. So that's always something that, in a way, is painful for me to see, and I feel powerless.
So you just mentioned something about the security of Iraq and people who are there threatened. So how do you see Iraq and Kurdistan? Like, do you see the safety here? Do you think the people are safe here?
I mean, I think that Iraq has so much potential as a country and could play such a big role in the region. And I think in the past it was the case. But I think, unfortunately, as you know, wars and conflicts over the past decades grew, the situation here became very unstable and unsafe, especially for minorities, especially for Yazidis who don't have, you know, often strong governmental representation, are not represented in the institutions. So that makes them, you know, a target. So I do think that even, you know, 10 years after the attacks, the situation remains unsafe, you know, in Sinjar particularly.
Natia, let's talk more about your new role as an Yazda new executive director. Can you tell us about it a little bit, maybe?
Yes, of course. So, you know, I joined Yazda in 2018, and I came and I have been here since then. In the beginning, I was leading Yazda's documentation project, which is about collecting, you know, the information and evidence of the crimes that were committed, you know. And we started this project in 2015. I took over 3 years later, and the project is really about making sure that what happened is not forgotten. As I said, we all have stories of, you know, firmans, and we all know some of our ancestors went through the worst. But if you try to find that information, you don't. And you know, we wanted to make sure as Yazda and as this project that this does not happen, that we collect and we use this information for justice, for accountability, also for cultural preservation, to make sure that our identity is captured and not lost. So I led that project for a few years, and then I was appointed as Yazda's first legal advocacy director. So then I was doing more high-level advocacy around justice. And, I was involved in the Yazidi survivors law. I was involved in prosecutions all over, and investigations all over the world. This opportunity came for me to take, the highest role in Yazda in a way. And of course, it's a huge responsibility. And especially with everything happening right now, it's the 10 mark this year. Funding is decreasing because, there are so many other things happening in the world, Ukraine, Palestine, and, even in Africa and Ethiopia, so many places. So the attention from us is shifting. So the question is how to keep it, how to make sure we are not forgotten. And then also the announcement of the closure of UNITAD, which is an investigative team that has been collecting evidence for years, and there's no plan on how this evidence will be used. The announcement of the closing of the camps, and still Sinjar agreement not in place. So many challenges. So it's very difficult to come into that role in this situation. But I feel I'm ready. I have been here, as I said, almost 6 years. I know Yazda. I know how we work, how to improve. I know the community, and I still have a lot to learn. But I think I have a good basis, and I really care about Yazidis, and I care about the interest of the Yazidi community above everything else. Above personal interests, above political interests, above any kind of interests. To me, moving forward, Yazda, and actually Yazda has been doing that. We have been, as an NGO, being very independent. We were created from the genocide for Yazidis, especially from Shingal. And I want to keep that. And I want to make sure that working and moving forward, we serve our community as much as we can.
Yeah, so like you were just talking about Yazda and how they were just formed and like founded. So, of course, there are many projects that Yazda is doing right now. So, could you tell us, please, about the projects of Yazda that are doing right now and about like the vision of it, in the future?
Of course. So, we have been responding to the emergency situation of the Yazidis since 2014. Yazda was created literally 3 weeks after ISIS attacks on Sinjar. And it means that we are now operating for almost 10 years. In the span of 10 years, we implemented a lot of projects, really, and we served thousands and thousands of people from the community. Our projects go from humanitarian projects like, psychosocial support and case management support to direct ISIS victims, but also projects around education, livelihood. So that's more the humanitarian component, and we will continue that. As long as the government is not addressing the needs of our community, NGOs need to fill that gap, including Yazda. And then the second big part of our work has been, justice advocacy, making sure that governments recognize the genocide and that they don't just recognize, but actually take action. And then justice, justice is very important for Yazidis. And I think it's deeply linked to all the firmans we were subjected to. We have this strong sense of justice. We want justice above everything else, we Definitely. Want, but when I say justice, it's not just court cases, it's also reparations, acknowledgement, exhumations of mass graves. This is something, I will never forget when they started exhumations in Kocho. I was there and I think it was one of those times where it hit me that we were working on a genocide, because you see, you smell like you. It was, really difficult, and still until today, 10 years after, not all of our mass graves have been exhumed yet. Missing people, people are still missing. So all these issues, 10 years after, are still present, and Yazda is committed to work on them with the community and for the community. So that's something that we need to continue.
Sure. So Yazda is right now doing the projects in Sinjar or Dohuk, or where specifically they are working. So
we have 2 offices in Dohuk. So one, where our main core staff is, like our finance, our HR, our M&E, and where I'm also based. And then we have another office, which is our project office. So we have project managers and their teams implementing the projects, either people coming to our office to get support or our teams going to the camps. And then we have 2 offices in Sinjar, one on the north side in Sununi and one on the south side in Sinjar city. Of course, right now, because everything that I said, UNITAD's closure, potential closure of the camps, people returning, a lot of people started to return again. We are right now reviewing our strategy, and probably we will give more focus to our work in Shingal, because this is where people ultimately,
it's very important,
are going back to, and we want to make sure they go back in a way that is, safe for them and in a dignified way. But it's as I said, it's also difficult because funding is decreasing, and I try to travel and meet donors as much as possible just to get some opportunities for our community, but it's difficult.
I mean, it's very important. Like nowadays, people are just returning to Sinjar, specifically after the end of the season of the school and education. I mean, it's very important for Yazda as well as an Yazidi organization to be there, to be present in Sinjar, so that people, they return, oh, there is Yazda, an Yazidi organization, then we will go there, we will just get support from them. So it's very important, in my opinion, then Yazda to have their presence in Sinjar as well, like in a better way, so that they can provide more support and assistance to the people. So it's very important for Yazda and for the people. So we talked about many things and we covered most of the things, but it's been 10 years, Natia. Until when Yazidis will just know about that they have been protected in this country? So 10 years of sufferings, living in IDP camps. Even in the city of Sinjar, they are suffering. Some of them in the European countries, some of them in Australia, in America, Canada. They are just thinking about Sinjar and the Yazidis who are still living in Sinjar. The mass graves are still opened. The remains, they are still in Baghdad. They haven't been identified. So what do you think about passing 10 years of the genocide, and what's Yazda's plan to do something for this?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, as I said, 10 years after, none of our issues has been fully resolved. We still have missing. We still, as you said, have mass graves, remains that were not identified. Security situation is still very, difficult. Justice in Iraq is not happening. Only terrorism trials are taking place here. And this is not the, justice the community wants. But I also want us to be hopeful, because I do believe very, very sincerely, and also talking to internationals, to people from other contexts where also, crimes were committed. I think our community in 10 years did a lot to help itself, by itself. Our advocacy, and I'm not talking just about Yazda, but many, especially survivors, brought us in the forefront of the international community. And even in Iraq, I think we really are making a space for us. I think that's very important to keep in mind, because I want the community to be hopeful. We did a lot in 10 years. There are other communities, as I said, especially, in Africa and other places, they're also subjected to the worst crimes, but no one knows about it. No one talks about it. So I think let's keep that hope. 10 years is a lot, but in the spam of international justice and what's happening in the world, it's not that much. So I think we should be very proud about what we achieved in 10 years. But of course, a lot still needs to be done. And I think we need to remember that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. We need to build our community stone by stone, and we need to leave a legacy so that the next generations can continue on what we build on. And for me, that's why education is so important.
Sure.
We need to invest in the youth, the young people. I went to the Catholic University of Erbil a few weeks ago, and I met bright young Yazidis, and I was so happy. They're studying international relations, they're studying law, they're studying many different things, and they're so smart and they're ready. They want to help their communities. And I think we need to invest in them, because Farhad, I really think that in our lifetime, we will never resolve all of our issues. It's impossible, but we will do our best. And this is why, Yazda will involve youth. We will build the foundation for others to continue. And something I also want to say, I think I'm the new executive director of Yazda, but Yazda is not about me. You know, Yazda is not about one person. Yazda is about this hope that we created for the community. And believe me, Yazda is hundreds of people who are right now with us or who left, and each of them contributed in a strong way. And it's about passing this heritage, this legacy to the next generations.
It's very perfect that new generation, new people who are interested in advocacy and delivering the real message of Yazidi. So we all are like proud of it and all the work that Yazda is doing. So Natia, I remember once you told me that when you had gotten the message from Yazda. How was that?
Oh, you mean when they offered me to go to Iraq?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that was, oh my God, like it's one of those days you will never forget. So, you know, as I told you, I was pushing Yazda UK to send me to Iraq, and they were working on that. And then one day I was just, you know, I was in London. I was living in the UK at that time, and I just got an email from Murad Ismail telling me like, oh yeah, you can move to Iraq. I think he said like next month or something like that. Are you ready? And I was with a friend. We were walking. I just stopped. I didn't tell her anything.
You were surprised.
I was not surprised. I mean, I was excited because I was waiting for that. I just literally did respond, and I said, okay, I accept. And I didn't talk to my family, as I told you. I hadn't prepared or planned anything.
Oh my God.
But you know, sometimes in life, you feel like it's the right thing to do at that moment. And I was waiting for that moment for like 4 years at that time, just to go to Iraq and try to support the community. So yeah, and then I went to Iraq, and I was welcomed by so many amazing people. And there's one I particularly want to mention, Mr. Jamil Chomer, who unfortunately passed away recently. And he was like a mentor to me. And he was one of those people in the Yazidi community that everyone needs to know about. And everyone, I think, and anyone who met him was, I think, inspired by him and his wisdom and how he had this Yazidism in him, you know, and he supported me a lot as a woman. He encouraged me to study more, to always do better, and to also, you know, manage my expectations, calm me down when I was stressed. Like, I think he was a father figure to many of us, and I want to mention him because without him, Yazda would never be what Yazda is today. He was there from the beginning, and he sacrificed his, you know, personal life and a lot of things, and you know, I think we should all remember him.
May God rest his soul in peace. I mean, it's very sad when you lose someone in your life who was with you in the work, so it's very complicated.
Yeah,
so,
and you need to all you can do is to keep the memory alive and to carry the legacy. I think we all have something from him inside of us.
I mean, for me, it's very difficult and complicated for me just to think about losing someone.
I know.
I mean, when we lose something very simple, like from ourselves, then we just feel very sad.
Yeah.
Then how about losing a person in your life that you used to live with him? It's very complicated. So, Natia, I just also want to know about how does Yazda work, like internally, like how, I don't want to go into details, but like you tell us about it maybe a little more.
Okay. So like, any NGO, Yazda has a board. So in our situation, Yazda was created, a board was established, and the board is basically giving the strategic advice to the NGO. And then you have the executive team, which I am leading, which is like implementing the strategy in the field. So the way we operate is that, we have structures in place. We have, as I said, we have finance, HR department. We have monitoring and evaluation. I don't want to give you like a whole brief on how an NGO works, but I think it's important for the community because I feel like sometimes people misunderstand.
Sure.
They think we get a lot of funding and we spend it, in a way that we just decide, but that's not the case. So in our advocacy, we try to raise with donors the needs of the community. Sometimes we get funding for that, but sometimes we don't. When we get funding, the donors, who are usually states, UN, aids of different countries give us that money, but they give us clear targets. So we have clear timelines and targets we need to achieve.
Sure.
And it's actually very, very difficult. And my team is working a lot. A lot of them are working outside of working hours. They don't count their hours. They're from the community, so they really want to serve their own people. But we need to be careful, we need to have self-care in place. We need to make sure that our staff also, doesn't burn out. Then they cannot serve the community.
Sure.
But, in terms of the targets, it's very, very clear with the donor. It's agreed on. And then the money is being spent to reach those targets. We cannot spend any dollar without justifying it to the donor. And I think this is important for people to understand. We have every month sometimes financial reports that our finance prepares that are sent to the donor. They check how we are implementing the project. We have audit every year. So we have external companies coming and checking how Yazda has been working and spending, the amounts and the implementing the projects. And we have annual reports. Every year we publish a report that explains everything we have done, all the projects we have implemented in the past. So I invite people, to look at those. They're on our website. And if they have questions, we are always available to answer these questions. Myself, my team, we are here because ultimately, for us, Yazda is the home of the Yazidis. They are, welcome to us anytime to ask questions, even to criticize. No one is perfect. And I hear some criticisms about Yazda, and I do think that we're trying to learn from that criticism. But I think, sometimes some things are not justified. I think it's important that people check the facts.
Sure.
And especially in the area of social media, it's so easy to target people and criticize, hiding in a way behind your screens. But Yazda is here to serve the community. We are not perfect. We have been established only 10 years ago, and now we're trying to be even more professional. As I told you, I'm trying to update the strategy with the team, try to see where are the gaps, where is Yazda able to position itself to serve the community in the long term, not just some projects, but in the long term, how to make sure Yazidi community survives in Iraq, because that's a big question. Like, people do want to leave, they don't feel safe here. So how to make sure that we don't lose our own, community and homeland. So very, very difficult questions. But yeah, and maybe also on the we also have HR, we recruit people in our organization based on specific criteria, and we have employed over the years hundreds and hundreds of people from Shingal, from Sheikhan, from Bashika, Bazane, from other communities. We are also open to other communities, of course, and we do select people based on what we need for them to know to implement the projects. And I know many people are disappointed. If it was for us, we would employ every Yazidi, but it's not possible. As an organization, you need to make decisions. And those decisions are based on the projects you implement and what criteria you need, what type of education that person should have. But we know it's very, very difficult. But, we are trying to also do our best.
Thank you so much. These things are very important for the people to know about it, that this is not something random. It's all being done like by structure, everything by system or by strategy. So I think it's very important. So
and even just to highlight another point, like we also have accountability in Yazda. People cannot do whatever they want. We have HR, we have a complaint system. We implement rules for ourselves. Even for me, if I do something that would be against the policies of Yazda, then I would be let go in a second, and the board is there to assure that. So I think it's very important to understand that Yazda is an NGO, of course, which was created from the genocide, and it is there to serve our community, but it's also a professional workplace where we have rules, policies, SOPs, working hours, and challenges, and all these things are very important for people to understand.
Yes, I think I totally agree with you, and everything you mentioned is like totally people, they just very important for them just to understand like how the strategy, how the structure is going. Natia, you covered everything. Thank you so much for the time, and if you have any like word before we finish.
Thanks a lot, Farhad. It was very
Thank you
pleasant
for
to
your
have
time.
this conversation. I would just say maybe as last words that I think that moving forward, it's very important for our community to work together and be united. I know that we are naturally very divided. You know, we are divided in castes, in tribes, in villages, sometimes north side, south side, in countries. You know, I'm not from here. And there's all this division that was created by the previous genocides. But I think that we need to try to see beyond that. We need to identify common goals and work towards them. And we have so many issues in our community. We can divide the work. You know, I think competition, especially among NGOs, is something natural. It happens everywhere. It's not just here. It's not just with Yazidis. It's everywhere. Believe me, in every context I had the opportunity to look at. But I think for our community, we don't have the luxury to be divided. We are like less than 2 million people in the world. If we don't work for ourselves, no one will do. And now we are entering the 10th year. The attention will decrease. Unfortunately, we need to know that. And we don't have this, again, luxury to be divided. And international community gave us attention. We need to use it in a smart way. So, yeah, I think the message is, you know, I hope we can all be more united. Not just NGOs, but our community in general. That's something that really struck me. When I came to Iraq, I thought the most difficult would be the work. Because you're working on a genocide, right? There is no hour in the day I don't think about my work, because my work is so personal to my community. So it's very hard. But another hard thing was just to see the division, you know, how people are divided and they don't put interest of Yazidis above everything else. Like, to me, that's what guides me, my work. I try to make decisions based on, okay, is that in favor of my community or not? And of course, sometimes I make mistakes. But this is what, you know, drives me and drives my work, and same for my team.
Thank you so much, Natia. We all agree about your message.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching.